So in this video, I'm going to review a couple TikToks that I've collected here, giving study tips and study hacks. There is a lot of like terrible study advice out there. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good stuff as well, but there's also a lot of terrible study advice that seems good on paper, but doesn't actually work. Because it's clickbaity, right? It's very easy to make something seem impressive, but not actually work. You know, I'll explain a bit more later, but I'm going to go through these TikToks now, watch them. You can watch them along with me, and I'll give you my opinions on them, give some extra value, let you know what I think of them. So let's go to the first video here that I found. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay, look, I could go on about this all day, right? But here's the thing. Students are obsessed with feeling busy, feeling productive, but not actually being productive, right? Like students will go on this like okay, there's a difference between being productive and feeling productive. Students will spend hours like printing out the lecture notes when they could just like look at it on their computer because they're spending a couple hours not using their brain, not doing any work, but they're feeling busy, right? This is exactly the same thing. Basically, what this program is doing is taking the teacher's words and just putting it onto your computer. It seems good on paper because you're like, oh my gosh, I can go to this lecture and do no work. The computer will do all the work for you. But here's the thing. You're basically outsourcing the learning to future you, right? It takes 0 brain cells. Press record on your computer and have the computer basically transcribe the whole lecture. It takes 0 brain cells. You are not doing any learning at all. So when you go home and you look at the notes that this AI has created, that's when you're doing the actual learning, right? So what's the point of even going to the lecture if you're not going to learn there and you're just going to record the lecture onto your computer, right? Now look, if your English is not that good and you can't understand the lecturer, 100% do this. But here's the thing. You are basically going to the lecture to feel productive, but you are outsourcing the learning to future you. It's kind of like going to a gym, sitting in all the machines that you're going to use, but not actually doing anything. And planning what you're going to do tomorrow in the gym. So like you're going to the lecture, but you're not actually doing the learning, because what's important is the learning, right? When you read the lecture material and you process it in your head and you do the learning, that's the important step. And what you're doing here is you're basically outsourcing the learning to future you. Like another example is like many students, they'll look at a lecture slide, right? And they'll have their notes. They will literally just copy the lecture slide word for word onto their notes. It takes 0 brain cells, 0 effort. Like when you're going to review your notes, that's when you're learning the material. So the step of like copying the notes onto your page, it's a complete waste of time, right? The real way to take notes is to learn at the lecture, learn on the slides, and put the notes in your own words, in your own understanding. That's why you do the notes, to show that you understand it and to put it in your own understanding. Just like copying and pasting takes 0 brain cells, no learning takes place there. That's the same thing with this program. I know many students do this. They'll go to a lecture, they'll record the lecture on their phone, and they'll just chill during the lecture, right? Then what's the point of going to the lecture? You may as well stay at home and watch the recording when you're at home, right? So yeah, I could go on about this all day, about how students are obsessed with feeling busy and not actually being busy. But that's the first video. Let's go on to the next one here. Let me just watch it again. Okay. I've never personally done something like this, so it could be good. I've never tried it, to be honest. It might work for you, but I can give you like a kind of related tip on this. Many students, tons of students, think that writing notes is essential. It's important. But let me tell you something. For the majority of my subjects in university, so I did an engineering degree, so this might not apply to like a law degree or something like that, so don't take this too seriously if you don't agree with it. But for most of my engineering degree, so I did like science subjects, math subjects, I basically did not take notes for most subjects, right? Because like I said in the first point, many students, their idea of taking notes is literally just copying and pasting the textbook, literally writing quote for quote what's on the lecture slides, what's on the textbook. And like I said, it takes no brain cells to do it. Making notes should be a part of the learning process where you like write down the notes in your own words, in your own understanding. That's why I kind of like this tip here, because you're basically rewriting the notes in your own understanding, right? That's how note taking should be. You're not taking notes to have the information readily available. The reason I don't take notes is because often the lecture slides and the textbook are good enough that I learn directly from the source. What's the point of taking the lecture slides and copying it onto paper and learning from the paper, right? Like my handwriting is kind of trash. I can't show you now, but my handwriting is kind of trash. So let's say I'm taking a lecture slide and I'm copying it onto paper in my own words and I'm learning from the paper. Why the hell would I learn the material from some guy's shitty handwriting, which is me, when I can learn from this crisp, beautiful printed lecture slide, right? So that's just a bonus thing. You don't have to take notes. It's not 100% essential. Like I remember, but the problem is teachers will ingrain into you that you must take notes. Like I remember in biology in high school, I basically didn't take notes, right? Like I would just, let's say we had to learn the Krebs cycle or something. Instead of writing down the Krebs cycle, I would just learn it through the textbook, reading it through the slides or whatever, right? So I took no notes in biology. And the teacher found out. He was like, okay guys, can you all give me your notebooks today? And he comes up to my notebook and he opens it up, my notebook, and there's just like bullshit in there, right? Like I was just like doodling random things. I had random lines everywhere throughout the page. And he was just in shock that I basically took zero notes, because he was like basically looking at our notes over the whole year, right? And he was shocked to see that I took zero notes over the whole year. And he was basically like, I cannot believe this, right? But like I did fine. It's not 100% necessary to take notes. Notes is just a way of learning, a way of understanding the information. Now maybe I'm just the type of person who doesn't like notes. You might be completely different. I'm not saying don't take notes, but just realize that there are other ways to learn than notes, okay? So yeah, this could be a pretty good tip. I'm not 100% sure. I've never tried something like this. I've tried similar stuff, like I've tried making mind maps of the subject, seeing where my gaps in knowledge are and stuff, and I like writing down the concepts and stuff. So yeah, pretty decent video. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. This seems cool on paper, right? It seems cool. Like, okay, exam, you study 2 weeks before. Test 3 to 4 days before. But the thing is, it's not, and never the night before. But here's the thing, it's not this simple. For example, what's the difference between an exam and a test? So like, again, these TikTok videos where it's like, oh, okay, this is what you should do. Study 4.53 minutes per day and do this exact thing. It doesn't work like that. You know, 2 weeks before to start studying for an exam, in my opinion, could be way too little. Like there have been subjects, like 2 sems ago, I started studying the subject pretty much when the subject ended, right? And I did okay, I did fine. But for most of my subjects, I will start preparing the exam literally from the first week. So I prefer to spread out my learning rather than crunch it 2 weeks before. So I don't think it's, you know, as straightforward to say start studying 2 weeks before the exam, right? And the other thing I want to mention about this is where it says never study the night before an exam. I do agree with this to an extent that pretty much most of the times when I've studied the night before an exam or even on the day of the exam, it's been a complete waste of time. Like I'm so stressed, it's so close to the deadline that nothing really gets in, nothing really gets learned. Like I think if you still have stuff that you have to study the night before an exam, then you're not prepared. It's as simple as that, right? You should really get to the point where the night before the exam, you're doing really chill stuff. You know, maybe you're doing some chill practice questions or just kind of chill going over the notes. If you're doing all your serious shit the night before the exam, then you've messed up. You've done it wrong, right? Like if you're in this situation right now, like don't panic too much. Do what you can. But again, do what you can. If you've left all your studying to the last day, just do what you can. It's not as simple as don't study the night before. High school, my chemistry exam, right? I was studying like an hour before the exam. The reason I was studying an hour before the exam is because like this girl that I liked invited me to study with her. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll study with her. Anyway, I was studying with her, right? And I actually learned a fact in that study session, 1 hour before the exam. I learned a fact that appeared on the exam. And because of that because of that studying session an hour before the exam, I managed to get that question right. And here's the thing. I got a 7 out of 7 by on the dot. I literally got exactly 80%. So if I hadn't have done that 1 hour of study before the exam, I probably would have gotten a whole grade lower. So again, I'm not saying, yes, you must study before an exam. You must not study before an exam. But what I'm saying is it's not as simple as don't study the night before an exam. Ideally, you wouldn't. And me personally, I never study on the day of an exam. But like, it's not as simple as do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Everyone's different, you know, and like my example, you can get some benefit out of it as well. Studying the night before an exam can cause you a lot of stress, and it can be so like so stressful that it's going to affect your ability to sleep. And often your ability to sleep, the sleep you get the night before an exam, will improve your performance. So the ideal scenario is that you've basically got nothing left to do the night before an exam, except for like simple tasks, you know, reviewing over some questions, reviewing over some notes, doing some really easy stuff. Ideally, you're not doing your hard work the night before an exam. You should be doing all the important tasks first, like past papers, stuff like that, using it as a guide. Go watch my video, 3 study hacks or something like that. I go into this a bit more in detail. But yeah, basically, the night before your exam should be a chill night where you're kind of like just taking a chill, reviewing your notes, or even studying another subject, right? You shouldn't be doing your hard, important stuff. Like, don't leave the important topics to the last night. That's what I'm saying. The students are going to ignore this and they're still going to do all-nighters the night before an exam. But like, hopefully you're a bit smarter than that. You actually take it seriously and start studying earlier. Like again, on this video, it says start studying 2 weeks before an exam. I do think that is way too little. You may as well like spread out your learning throughout the sem rather than crunch it all the night before, right? Because like, you've probably heard of something called like the memory curve or something like that. Basically, the longer you spend learning a concept, the more it gets ingrained into you, right? So if you memorize a fact the night before an exam, it's less deep in your brain than if you review it like once a week for like 12 weeks, right? So it's better to spread out your learning. That will actually ingrain the knowledge much deeper into your brain. Maybe I'll make a video on this, on like the learning curve or whatever, or the forgetting curve, I think it's called. Anyway, so again, it's not as simple as this. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought this would be a fun video, reviewing some TikToks, some study hacks. Let me know what you think in the comments. See you later.